Good morning, councillors, and welcome to the meeting of the Corporate Services Committee, today the 18th of February 2022. First order of business, just a little bit of a technicality here because the chair is, the current chair is on Zoom. As you know, under the meeting practice, council has to resolve to accept applications to attend via video link. So I will put that to the vote. All in favour of Councillor Williamson attending by video link? Okay, unanimous. Thank you very much. Councillor Williamson, you may join us officially now.
Thank you. Thank you all.
The chair has indicated that he may find it difficult to chair the meeting via Zoom, and has asked that one of the other committee members chair the meeting. So I'll call for nominations for somebody to chair the meeting. Okay, thank you. Second, all in favour? Okay, Councillor Burns, you will chair the meeting and we'll take over from you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Annabolson. Councillors, welcome to the first of many corporate services meetings. The first agenda item is apologies, being that we are all here. We've received a, yep.
Apology from the General Manager.
A mover and a seconder. All those in favour? The ayes have it. Disclosures of interest.
No received, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chairman,
yes.
Mr. Chair, if I may just mention, I actually have to leave the meeting at 9:30 for 20 minutes because I'm presenting at the Independent Planning Commission Narrabri Coal Expansion, so I'll be absent for 20 minutes.
Understood.
So thank you very much.
Okay, no public participation. We'll move straight into the agenda then. Review of Corporate Services Committee Charter, Corporate 0201, or sorry, 02.1. For mover and a seconder.
I'll move it.
I'll second it. In the charter, I'll just make a comment on this. In the charter, this meeting was actually held at a different time in days gone past, and then it was moved to 8:30 on the Friday morning to accommodate the then chair. I'm wondering if the committee would consider moving this to 9 o'clock instead of 8:30 because staff do find it very difficult to get this ready in time.
I'm happy with that.
Yep. Okay, well, can you note that down, please, Rob? That amendment was made. All those in favour of the recommendation with the 9 o'clock change?
Aye.
The ayes have it. Congratulations, staff. Corporate Services 02.2 Financial Summary and Investment Report. Mr. Phelps.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Welcome all councillors to the first corporate services meeting of the new term. So we'll quickly roll through the finance papers. Obviously, it's a large document coming through for the number of areas. So we'll just go through it as we call for it. And any questions, just definitely raise your hand or ask. Yep.
Just have one with the BBSW. What does that stand for? I'm sorry, it's probably very obvious.
Yeah, no, that's the yeah.
Bank bill swap rate.
Yeah. It's a bit of an acronym, so it's just in the banking terms. So that's just the average rate we get from the Commonwealth Bank.
So sorry, just to clarify, through you, Mr. Chair, that was bank bill.
Yeah, the bank bill swap rate. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the industry benchmark for return on investments.
Okay, rightio. So we'll move into the financial information summary that you'll see on page 8. So here, we've just got a bit of a terminology up the top there. The year end to the end of the 31st of December, there was a positive variance. So we're looking at the December quarter period and year to date, December year end, year to date. There's a positive variance of 1.94 million compared to a positive variance that was in the October, which was the last report that went up in regards to the finance papers, of 4.36 million. Just quickly to run you through the high level numbers coming through, what makes that positive variance to budget. So the first line is more or less the revenue stream. So this is operating revenue. And it was up by nearly about $1.6 million, which is about 4%. Now, there's a number of movers in that. The major factors that were in play was the children's services revenues were a bit lower by 97K due to COVID impacts, and the actual vacancy we have there for the early childhood teacher, which determines the number of children we can have on the facility. Sale yards revenue was down by $89,000. The cattle number throughput was lower than anticipated in the original budget. So the numbers have been relatively stable over the course of the last 3 months, but we're hoping that there will be an increase in those numbers, but it's sitting around about the 700 head average at the moment. Airport revenues are lower by 72K. That's the operational side of the airport, landing fees and so forth. So it's lower than expected. There is some invoicing to go in for the end of the year. So there's a bit of a timing lag there. Rms State Roads is lower by 118,000. We've had limited work over on the Golden Highway where we do a lot of the state road work. So obviously with transport, they provide requests for us to do work on the Golden Highway, and those have been a little bit limited at this point in time. We have just recently secured a bit of work for about 600K. So it should hopefully push back up towards the budget numbers by the year end. Local road revenue was higher by 1.86 million. Main reason for that is that we received in advance or earlier than we anticipated Barrington Forest Road Stage 2. So we received a milestone payment that we weren't expecting. So we're actually doing design works at the moment. So as you'll see in the detailed area, we've put that into an RA for the construction works to start next year. Transport auxiliaries is a little bit higher by about 160,000, mainly the resources for regions grant funding that's coming through. We just got that a little bit earlier than we anticipated. And our last one on the revenue side is the water supply usage charges. They're lower than budget by about 77K. It's just the usage of water. Obviously, with all the wet season been happening at the moment, our water usage from our residents has been a lot lower than anticipated. So that's the main drivers behind our revenue side of the equation. The non-revenue and non-operating revenue and expenditure. These are mainly all internal type transactions that come through. And as you can see there, the main driver for the lower amount of 181,000 was mainly due to our internal fleet hire charges. Now that's a lot of determined on our capital works program and using our fleet in doing those works. Obviously, we've got a lot of capital work still to deliver, and that obviously will increase over the course of the next 6 months. So we should bring that back into parity. Just to give you a highlight, that we've got about $2 million coming through. So it's out by about 10% at this point in time. So it's not overly worrying at this junction. Operating revenue, expenses, I beg your pardon, operating expenditure, nearly dead on line overall when we look at our operating expenditure. There's a couple of major movers within that. Government Place Hostel, as we've indicated previously, its costs are way up compared to our budget at this point, and that's mainly due to the costs associated with our staff employment, difficulties encountering with vacancies and rostering issues, but also with compliance issues and so forth. So we've had to put a lot of money back into the facility to bring it up to spec in regards to the Department of Health and Ageing. So obviously, though, they continue to come out and do reviews on our facility, which we are improving coming through. So, but unfortunately, that comes at a cost. Waste management costs are lower than budget, a little bit lower in our curbside and bulky waste collection at this point, but it's pretty well in line with budget, which is quite good. Obviously, with the state roads revenue being down, our costs for our works over there on state roads is also down. So it's down by about 114,000. And the last one there is our regional local roads maintenance. It's a bit higher than budget at the moment by nearly 300,000. Main reason for that is because of the flood incidents that we've had in the last couple of months of last year. So we've got a lot of costs that have been allocated to our maintenance areas for flood damage. Those will be identified and will be after a claim from the government in regards to disaster recovery. So we're going through and pinpointing all our incidents at this point, and then they'll be submitted to Transport for recovery. So obviously, once we have that number, we'll be able to isolate that out and identify it.
Just sorry, with that, it's a dollar for dollar recovery, isn't it?
No, we actually have a threshold of about 250K the council pays over a period of time. But saying that, we are allowed to claim our day labour. Normally with the disaster recovery, previously what happened was that if we went out during the day and our staff went out on a normal working day, we weren't allowed to claim that back from the government for the works for flood damage. Now that we've taken the threshold, we're allowed to claim all our day labour and everything. So it's like a bit of a up and down.
Yeah. Thank you.
The next part of the summary is in regards to capital works expenditure. It's about $500,000 behind budget at this point in time, but then we've got a number of items that are up and down throughout the mix. Our plant replacements, we've got about 200,000 extra with a couple of vehicles that were ordered last year. There's been a lag in delivery of vehicles. They've come in the first half of this financial year. Our moving bay up at the waste facility in Scone, it's a little bit behind. We've got the initial designs done and it's starting to ramp up at this point. The airport development is higher than budget by about 148,000. Currently, it's on schedule, so it's progressing along. Cameron's Bridge replacement is lower to budget by about 340,000. We're just waiting on a progress payment to come in from the supplier, but that project is continuing on schedule, so it's going well. Tullong Road project has been completed. The costs on that project were a little higher than we anticipated. So we'll be using our R2R funding from the government in regards to covering that cost off. So it'll be extra grant funds to cover the 111,000. Local roads resheet program is a bit lower by about 200,000. Work's continuing. We have got some costs that still are to come in at year end, but it's continuing on track at this point in time, which has been quite good. Our integrated water catchment plan of water and sewer management, it's lower than budget at the moment. The works are continuing with the consultants, but they haven't invoiced us yet, so it's a bit of a timing thing with our invoicing. And our sewer renewals and replacements are lower than budget by about 400,000 at this point. Ultimately, we've adopted a number of tenders that went out in regards to the sewer works, and that'll couple into the renewals and replacements as we're coming through the mix. So you can anticipate that those funds will be spent over the course of the next 6 months. So overall, as you can see, it's a variance to budget of 1.94 million. Budget position overall, we've done a number of votes, as you'll see coming through the mix in regards to the finance papers, but they all net back to zero to our budget. So our original budget still stands as it stood at the beginning of the year. Moving on to our bank funds and investments. Currently at the end of December, we had $32 million in investments and bank funds. 31.5 of that was in our investment portfolio. And we've included two schedules in here as we'll walk through the papers for the December and November period. So included in the KPIs is that we have to display our investments every month. Capital expenditure. Here we've got a revised capital works expenditure program of $40.5 million. Obviously, that's a decrease on the 64.7, which was a pretty optimistic number from our Depop when we delivered it. However, we've revised that down in the the corporate services meeting that was held in November, down to a more realistic level. At the moment, to the end of December, we've only spent $13.8 million, which represents 34% of the overall revised budget. So as you can see, there's still a lot of work to be completed coming through. We are definitely looking at that on a monthly basis in our infrastructure works meetings. So the senior management group are going through that on a monthly basis and highlighting anything that looks unrealistic now, so that we can actually identify it and raise it as a proposed surrender, and also then bring it back into the Depop process for next financial year and beyond.
Just got a question, I think, from Councillor Williamson.
Yes, Councillor Williamson.
You're muted.
You're on mute, mate.
Just curious about the reassessment of those expenditures by 20 million. It seems like a big jump. I just wondered what we dropped out of there, Wayne, or how did that process go about?
Yes, Councillor Williamson. The majority of it was projects that had like Moonambrook Road, which was about 5 million. Our CBD revitalisation down here in Scone, which was another 5 to 6 million. So there was very big chunky projects that we haven't got to the stage of actual construction phase. So they were included in last year's Depop. And in hindsight, it should have been left over until at least next financial year or the year after for delivery of those projects. So they were very chunky, but I can actually send you a list of exactly what we actually wrote back out if you wish.
No, that's terrific. Thank you, Wayne. That'd be great.
Yeah, we'll have that to all the committee.
Yep, definitely, not a problem. Moving down through the KPI side of things, here we've got attached to the report is our red KPIs. So at the moment we're tracking at 37 of those out of 125 indicators, as indicated previously in the Depop, are off track. So nearly 30% of it is off track to date, which doesn't meet our 90% satisfactory target, being only effectively 70%. There has been effects from COVID, obviously, things outside our control, which we've highlighted there. 9 of the 37 relates to that, which brings the off-track targets down to 22.4%. Still, there's a lot of work to be done in the KPIs. And again, this is another one that's a focus of the senior management group, who are reviewing those on a monthly basis coming through. And more or less addressing the issues that for those KPI deliveries. The next page.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Just with removing those 9 sections, we're still off track though. I mean, why would we remove them? I mean, COVID was a factor, and so I don't understand why we would remove them to then improve the percentage.
That's only just an indicator, Councillor Abbott. It's not what would be reported at year end in our annual report. effectively we would have a note on it saying that the indicators, that the amount of indicators that were affected by factors outside our control, which be it COVID, be it drought, those type of items, but we'd still report on the full amount of off-track items.
Yeah, Councillor, if you look at the pie chart there on page 12,
Yes.
essentially the reds are, well, the 28 plus the 9. We've still in the legend said they're red. We haven't said that they're not red, but they are red due to COVID factors. We just wanted to highlight that. Potentially things that are outside our control.
Yes.
But certainly if you add the 28 and the 9, that gives you the total red. Yep.
I understand that COVID's an impact, but it still means we're off track. And so I don't actually understand the exercise of removing those related to COVID. I mean, I do understand it, but we're still off track because of COVID.
Yeah.
And because of many things.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving right along. So the next part of the report is in regards to some schedules attached to it. The first one is more or less the summary, a high-level summary of our position coming through. The first page on page 14 represents our different funds. So obviously with council, we have 3 different funds, being the general fund, the water fund, and the sewer fund. The water and sewer fund are itemised separately because they have their own bucket of money to be utilised for those utilities coming through. The next 3 pages after that, from 15 through to 17, we have a more service-driven summary in regards to our different service areas within council, and it goes through your operating revenue, your non-operating revenue, our operating expenditure, non-operating expenditure, and capital expenditure. So that's where a lot of those ones from the summary page come from. As you can see, there's multiple votes coming through. As we'll go through the service reports, we'll highlight those in more detail. But overall, the bottom line on page 17, there's the request votes come back to 0. As I said, we'll discuss those further as we go through. The next couple of pages, as you will see on pages 18 through to 19, is effectively our votes that we've got coming through the mix. So it's more or less just a summary of what votes are throughout the whole service reports. So these are the ones that we highlight coming down. So obviously they cross each other off, debits and credits all the way down. So it comes back to a 0 amount on the bottom line.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Can we ask questions now or wait till it actually comes up later in the agenda?
Yeah, whatever.
Okay, I just wanted to, with governance and risk
Yep.
and the reallocation budget savings
Yep.
to higher insurance premiums
Yep.
and higher public liability, those 2.
Yep.
What's happening there?
Our insurance premiums each year obviously are based on risk from our brokers, and the insurance costs did increase. We did have some savings coming through from a vacancy in the role of the manager of governance. So we're more or less just offsetting some savings against extra costs, which is pretty regular throughout the mix. So if you try and when you're looking at your overall financial position, if areas can pay for overspends within that service area, that's what we try to do.
Okay, thank you. And also on page 19,
Mhm.
under local roads, non-operating
Mhm.
revenue, local roads infrastructure RA, what's happening there?
Yeah, that's the actual extra funds we got in earlier than we anticipated for Barrington Forest Road Stage 2. So we received a milestone payment up front when we actually executed the funding deed. And because we're not going to start construction on that until next financial year, those funds that we received in advance, we isolate into an RA to bring it back in next year.
Thank you.
Okay.
Just for the new councillors, RA is a restricted asset. That means we put that essentially in a cache of restricted funds that we unable to spend for general operations. They're restricted for a specific purpose.
Okay, moving down now to page 20 through to 22, just more or less the bank reconciliation and a graph of where our bank and investments have been over the last 12 months. So as you can see, the worm goes up and down all the way across there. So at the moment, we're sitting at around that $32 million mark. Our investments that we're holding at this point in time on page 21 to the end of December was 31.5 million as indicated earlier. And those are the investments that we are actually holding. So we've got there. And as you can see, the rates are still relatively low. However, there has been an uptick in the market over the last month or so, which we've been able to secure a bit higher interest returns, which is a benefit to council. The next schedule that we've got in there is on page 23, and this one's a little bit blurry when you look at it. It's the loan schedule. So overall, the principal owing at the end of December was $36 million. So that's that bottom line number there. If you like, I'll send around to all councillors a better printout of that so you can actually see it and where the loans are.
Just so you're aware, the reason that it is blurry like that is because it comes off a system that doesn't like to go into the other system. So that it's always been like this.
Okay, and then moving down into our red KPI. So this is more or less the summary of all those off-track indicators, including the ones that are COVID and everything. So this is the whole 37 of them, with commentary on the reasons why they're off track and how we're going to bring those back on track by the year end coming through. So as you can see, we've got a number of items there with our policies, our monies that are held more than 90 days, some stock takes, and you work down through the camping areas, which is COVID affected ones. But it's mainly just to give councillors a summary overall of where those off-track items are. I'll just let you have a bit of a read of that before I go further.
Through you, Mr. Chair. The road infrastructure loan, is that the 5 million for the Merrywall-Willertree road that was taken out?
Which one is that, councillor?
Page 23.
23.
Third from the bottom.
Yep. Oh, this is on your the loans.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yes. Okay.
Yep.
So through you, Mr. Chair, are we going through the KPIs individually? How do we do this bit?
More or less let the councillors read through them.
Okay,
Yep. And if you need any questions or anything like that, you're more than welcome to ask questions.
I have a question.
Yep.
So on page 27, through you, Mr. Chair, what happened to the other 3 animals?
Mr. Pringle?
Is it
They would still be impounded.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so we don't, very rarely would any animals be euthanised or anything like that.
Okay, thank you.
They'd be rehomed or returned to their owner.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Shall I keep going?
Yes.
Then the technology options on page 29, and I'm just wondering what's happening there. And yes,
In regards to the public libraries?
yes, I beg your pardon. Yes, in regards to the public libraries, on the top of that page, developing new technology options. This has been ongoing for close to 5 years. So what are we going to do about this? What's happening? Through you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Pringle?
So new technology options of the libraries. There is a position that we will be creating in the libraries, a technical librarian. We'll be working on those technology options for us. At this stage, that position hasn't been created, but that's something they'll be looking at as part of that role.
And thank you. And through you, Mr. Chair, also the next one down with a number of new resources, collection items added for collection improvement. We had a target of 999. and it was actually 300. So again, that's a big discrepancy, and the librarian's currently on leave. There is another librarian though. When she's on leave, is there nobody else who then steps up? I don't understand why we have that in there as a comment.
Yep. Ultimately, as Mr. Pringle mentioned earlier, the technical service officer will drive a lot of that collection upgrades and so forth. I know that the librarian is now back off leave and actually looking at the collection and ordering collection in. So that hopefully will catch up by the end of the year, Councillor.
The next KPI consultations through you, Mr. Chair, with the community. It says limited ability due to COVID, but I don't understand why, because we have Facebook and Instagram and the snail mail, so we could have had community consultation. So why didn't we?
Probably take it on.
Yeah, I'll have to take that on notice.
Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the sewage services, the number of customer complaints, that's in the red, and the actuals are 17 compared to 6, but the comment is that there's been fewer. So what's the disparity there?
That's a year-to-date figure. I think they're talking in regards to the monthly result, so it's improved from where it was. We'll take it on notice and get clarity around it for you, Councillor.
Because it's in the red, so it doesn't add up with the comment.
Understand.
On page, through you, Mr. Chair, on page 31, in relation to footpaths and cycleways, where we've had a number of customer requests received concerning unsafe conditions. So it says here that council is going to monitor the footpaths, but are we fixing them, or what is happening? And we're in the red there.
Yep, we'll take it on notice, Councillor, because the director isn't here to answer that question. So we'll take that on notice and come back with a response for you.
Through you, Mr. Chair. In terms of the cycleways, I believe that St Mary's was approved to get a cycleway connector many years ago. Has that just fallen off the radar, or?
I'll take that on notice as well. We'd have to go back and have a look at the history and ask the director as well.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Any further questions? Oh, you're still looking down through them. Happy to move on?
Everyone
Okay.
exhausted their questions? Lovely. Okay, councillors, corporate, back on page 7, corporate .02.2, recommendation that the committee note number 1, note the fund and function summary report. 2, note the cash and investment report. 3, note the responsible accounting officer's statement on the investments. 4, note the capital works expenditure report. And 5, adopt the proposed budget variations. So what, for the new councillors, noting the report, you're saying, yes, you've received it, and that's all you're saying. That's, you may not agree with it, you may agree with it, but that's all you're saying when you note it, okay? But when you adopt it, the bottom point there, you're actually saying, yes, you can move that money. I have a mover and a seconder for the recommendation.
Move it.
Moved Councillor Abbott, seconded Councillor Flaherty. All those in favour? The ayes have it. Page 35, corporate .02.3, operational report. Wayne.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You got enough water there, Wayne?
Yes, I have. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Obviously, what we'll do with these reports, I'll just quickly roll through as we're going down, but obviously you're more than welcome to ask questions and so forth, put the hand up. We'll try and monitor up there, Councillor Williamson, with your hand. And just more or less, I'll be highlighting just different areas, the votes coming through and whereabouts we're sitting. So first one off the rank is our asset management area, which is page 38. There's no votes or surrenders in this one here. A little bit in front of budget, but we're more or less have money due to our road safety officer. We've had that position vacant for a little while now, so there's a bit of a saving there, but there's an offsetter against our revenue streams as well. So we're looking at filling that position at this point in time. Communications on page 39, no votes or surrenders here, a little bit in front of budget. Again, there was mainly with a vacant position there at the beginning of the year, so there's a bit of a saving. Our KPI on page 40, we've got a green indicator there, so there's nothing to highlight there. We're tracking okay. Corporate services on page 41, no votes or surrenders, a little bit overspent to date, just in salaries at the moment. Our next one is our KPI on page 42. It's a red indicator, and that's part of one of those in the summary. That's our policies that are off track at this point in time. So we're 55% against the target of 90. So we will improve that over the next 6 months. Customer service, this is where we'll see our first votes that happen within its own little service area. Here we've got a vote going through for our other income and also our admin costs. So we had some training reimbursements come through from Service New South Wales, which we've offset against the additional casual wages we had to put in place for that training of the person who went over to Service New South Wales. Overall, we're pretty well tracking on budget once you take those out of the mix. KPI on page 44, a green indicator there, so nothing to highlight there. Depot operations on page 45 and 46, no votes or surrenders, tracking along okay in regards to our budget. So we've got a few little savings in our operating expenditure, but our revenue is down slightly from our revenue from our towers. So we've got two-way towers going through, we get lease fees for them. Financial services on pages 47 to 48. Here we've got no votes or surrenders coming through. Overall, we're pretty well sitting back on budget, so nothing much to highlight there. A little bit of overruns in our bank charges and cleaning costs today, so we'll continue to monitor that as it comes through. Page 49, KPI there, a green indicator, which there's nothing to highlight there. In regards to our on costs, which is on page 50, here is where we charge back through our system the on costs for our leave and workers' comp, super and so forth. We're a little bit behind where we anticipated. They've been distributed to date. As you can see there, our actual is only about 2.1 million and our budget number for our on costs is 2.6 million. Overall, it goes up and down with a bit of timing in regards to our leave. So in January, there would have been a lot of leave, people taking school holidays off and so forth. So that hopefully will come back into parity by year end, which is pretty well the trend. Fleet management, here we've got just a vote going through. As I mentioned earlier, we had those acquisitions of the 3 additional vehicles coming through, so we've just put 150,000 out of our reserve back in to pay for those vehicles. So apart from that, the only other item in there is mainly our internal fleet hire, which I raised earlier about our lower utilisation to date, but that will fix itself by year end with our capital works program. KPI side of things on pages 53 to 54, 2 green indicators there, so there's nothing to highlight there. General management on page 55. Here we've got no votes or surrenders, a little bit overspend in our salaries area at this point in time. But we'll monitor that as we're coming through. Green indicator for our KPI on page 56. So nothing to highlight there. Just in governance and risk, here we've got the little vote and surrender coming through just to offset those 2 items. In general expenses, you'll see a little bit of an overspend there. That's there's an actual accrual that we have to reverse back out of the system for that item for our audit last year, which has been completed. Once that comes back out, we're nearly back into parity with our overall result. KPI side of things, a green indicator there, so there's nothing to highlight there. We've had a couple of meetings already, which is quite good. Human resources on page 59. Again, another one that's in and out in the service area, just moving a bit of money from our trainee costs up into our normal HR admin costs. And the main reason for that is our HR trainee position. We replaced that with a HR advisory role. So it was more or less not a trainee anymore. So it's gone back up into the normal staffing costs. Apart from that, we're a little bit in front of budget, and it's mainly due to our, as you can see, the grant income there, which is our monies we receive from the government in regards to traineeships and apprenticeships, which is a little bit in front of budget, which is quite good.
Through you, Mr. Chair.
Yep.
My page 60 is mashed.
Yes, yes. No, we understand that there's a couple of mashed pages in there for that. Overall, we'll give you we'll redo the actual papers and everything and give you a new version of it. I think it's just with the formatting of it coming through, it just got mashed up in our processes. So we will update all those and provide another copy of it with that, Councillor. The one that I think got mashed was the information services one, which is a great one, being IT. Coming through. So overall with information services, we're pretty well tracking okay. A bit of a timing thing, which was a little bit in front of budget, but there's no votes or surrenders in there. And its KPI was a red indicator, a green indicator as well. So it's nothing to highlight. And the next one is on 62, which is our infrastructure support. Here we've got no votes or surrenders coming through. And we're a little bit overspent at the moment, just with the higher costs for the director recruitment. So obviously with our new director of infrastructure on board, we had a bit of extra costs in regards to securing that position. Revenue services on page 63, no votes or surrenders coming through here. A little bit behind budget at the moment, mainly due to lower revenue streams coming down because we've limited our recovery actions until the end of December last year, mainly due to COVID and business economic positions. So what we have on the backside of that is that our legal and debt costs of 70,000 there, which there's a bit of a timing issue with that. So that'll come back into saving as well. So by the end of the year, they'll offset each other. Moving through to our KPIs on pages 64 to 66. Here we've got two green indicators and a red indicator. The red indicator is our ones that are more than 90 days of our unarranged accounts receivable. As you can see, it's about 70,000 over at the moment. Obviously with the debt collection recommencing, hopefully that will come down to where our target should lie.
Just on that, what's the longest that we've got outstanding at the moment?
We more or less would have probably going back. It could be 5 years, so we can do a schedule and give you a schedule of how long, if you like.
Yeah, I think that's appropriate. And I note that Gunnedah Council's just auctioned off some properties because they were lagging and their rate base is a lot bigger than ours.
Yeah, through the chair, we went through that process about 5 years ago and recovered those sort of debts back through the rates recovering. Moving into our stores and purchasing area on page 67. Here we've just got a little bit of an offsetter inside itself. We're actually, our storeman has been on extended leave. And we're actually introducing a new procurement package, software package, which hopefully will benefit council through ease of obtaining quotes and also getting a bit more value for money coming through the system to acquire our goods and services. So overall, it should be a benefit going down the track. At the moment, you can see that we're overspent by about 15K, mainly due to the suspense account there for Scone. That's more or less a gravel stockpile. What happens with that is we put a stockpile on the ground and then that will be dispersed to roads as and when it's utilised. So by year end, that comes back to zero. Going into the KPIs on pages 68 through to 70, here we've got a green indicator and amber one, which is our stock levels, and the red indicator, which is our stock take. So obviously with the extended leave for our storemen, we weren't able to do a stock take as we normally would do in November, December. However, we're going to do two over the course of the next 6 months. So we'll be doing one very shortly. Sustainability on page 71. Here we'll see a vote and the money going into our little RA for our renewables. So with the rollout of our streetlight LED program, we've received a rebate from the carbon bank. So we've got more or less put away nearly $40,000 into the renewables RA for future use for projects relating to sustainability. KPI side of things on page 72, two green indicators there, so nothing to highlight there. The education and...
Sorry, through you, Mr. Chair, I have a question.
Yep.
Are the KPI, the first one on page 72, what does that mean? We've got the target and the actual. So we've got the target was 50% and the actual was 195%. What does that mean?
That's the strategy adopted by council.
But what does the target?
That would be the actual how far we would have got through the review and update of the sustainability action plan. So we were expecting to be halfway through the actual sustainability and action plan. Obviously, the 195 doesn't look a right number, Councillor.
No, it doesn't look like the right number.
So we'll get a clarity on that number and advise it.
And then also the next one, with reduction of council's greenhouse gas emissions by 10% through you, Mr. Chair. The target was 5%, it was actually 5%. But how was this based and how can we make that claim?
Through Mr. Chair, so this would be based on the projects that we've undertaken over the last few months. So, I mean, one project in particular, one program in particular was the contract for the joint power purchase agreement with 6 councils in the Hunter region. So we've actually started purchasing that green energy now, and that reduces our emissions by 20% straight up. So, so with those sorts of significant projects.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, is it possible for us to be provided with the document where it sets out what our goals are for reducing our emissions so that we can see how it's reduced?
Through Mr. Chair, that's through the climate change strategy.
Thank you, Mr. Pringlebert. So, Mr. Chair, through you, the climate change strategy didn't really set out specific targets. So there's specific targets here that we've clearly gathered this evidence that we've reduced our greenhouse gas emissions by 5%. So is it possible to actually match that up through you, Mr. Chair, with the targets and then the percentage of reduction of emissions?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we can certainly look at doing that and putting some figures together for you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Council.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Thank you. Moving down to community services, the admin and education area. No votes or surrenders here. A little bit underspending our salaries, but apart from that, nothing else to highlight there. The KPIs on page 74 and 75, 2 green indicators coming through. So we're going okay with that community services side of the business. Moving into the aged care, and as indicated earlier, this is one where it's very a hard task at the moment. However, we're doing the best we can in regards to our compliance issues and so forth. On page 76, 77, here we've got just a small vote and surrenders going through, more or less upgrading our air conditioning system over there that required an upgrade. So we've moved a little bit of money from a couple of other capital works programs there, just up into the requirement for the aircon. So overall, you can see there that we're about 160,000 behind budget at the moment, mainly due to our overspend in our operating expenditure. So obviously with our wages for our personal care and also the cost for our consultants coming through. But that is a position where we'll be continually monitoring every month over the course of the rest of the year and trying to alleviate some of the overspends. KPI side of things on 78 to 80. We've got 2 green indicators and 1 red indicator. The red indicator more or less relates to the occupancy over at the hostel. Unfortunately, we had a couple of vacancies at the end of December, one of which has now been filled. So we still got 1, as far as I'm aware, a vacancy over there at this point. But the whole facility really drives upon having a full occupancy rate. So that does have an effect overall on its profitability. Moving into our independent living units on pages 81 to 82. Here we've just got a little bit of a vote on either side. This is more or less to complete our construction of the 2 fire damaged units up at Murrundi. So obviously we'll receive a little bit more in our insurance claims coming through, and we've got a bit of an overspend in our capital expenditure down in 82 there. So they're more or less offsetting each other coming into the mix. But apart from that, it's about the main reason why she's overspent at the moment. Moving into our KPIs on page 83, a green indicator there. So there's nothing to highlight there. Before and after school care, the social operation finished up in July. So we're pretty well line ball there. Early Learning Centre on pages 85 through to 86. Here we've got a small vote coming through from an RA in regards to our drought support program. So we went through and put a few measures in place. We've got a bit of funding for that about 2 years ago. So we've just utilised that for our put a water harvesting tank over there. So that was quite good and the kids loved it. Moving down to our overall position, we're pretty well line ball situation coming through, even though our numbers are down. So our revenue streams are down, but our costs for our casual wages is also down. So it's more or less offsetting each other at the moment, but it's a very difficult situation at the moment, especially with vacancies and so forth coming through and COVID hitting the facility during January as well, where we had to shut down for a couple of days. Moving into our KPI side of things, to the end of December, we were sitting at an amber position, which is about 89% of where we thought we'd be with the 43 children capacity. So we need to push that up to around that 98% mark to make it a good, viable operation. Family daycare, another one that's affected slightly by COVID coming through the mix. No votes or surrenders coming through, a little bit behind budget at this point in time. But overall, it's mainly with our educators. Our educator numbers are being down at the moment with the kids going through there. So as you can see by the KPI that's on page 89, we're off target by about 17 full-time equivalent children. So we've just re-established a couple of educators. So hopefully those numbers will start to pick up again. Moving into our social protection area on pages 90 to 91. Here we were successful in getting a little bit of some grant funding for mental health first aid workshops. So we've more or less brought in the grant vote and also the costs associated with that. So we've now got about 7,000 towards mental health programs coming into the mix. But apart from that, our programs are continuing over the course of the year. Moving into our KPI side of things, here we've got on pages 92 to 94, 3 green indicators coming through. So there's nothing to highlight there. We're meeting our programs. And as you can see, we've got a number of programs that probably hit the mark coming through over the next 6 months.
Through you,
Yep.
Mr. Chair. Just in relation back on page 90 to the Heatwave strategy plan, Obviously, we're probably not thinking about that too much at the moment because it's been pretty mild, but we will be, just want to know if that is still on track for us to be developing.
The funds are available for that program. The director might want to answer.
Yes, through the chair, it's something we'll be working on over the coming months.
Yep. With a lot of those programs, councillor, if those funds aren't spent on the program by year end, we'll put it into an RA and bring it back to make sure that the program's completed.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, for the same program. So that it will be the Heatwave strategy. Thank you.
Yep. That's if it's unspent by the year end. Moving into our youth services area, on page 90, excuse me, on 95 through to 96. Here we've got a small vote coming through on both sides of the ledger. Obviously, we were successful in a little bit of a grant funding for the winter holiday program for the youth around the area here. And obviously we're fully costing that coming through. So we've got a program in place for our youth and getting involved again, bringing the kids back into the youth centres. Overall, we're pretty well hitting the mark on our position. So it's all good. KPI side of things on 97 through to 100, all green indicators. So we're meeting the mark in regards to providing the services to our youth area. Moving into our economic affairs area, camping areas and caravan parks. On page 101, here you'll see there's a vote coming through. We're just putting a bit of additional grant funding towards the caravan side office over at Merriwar. So obviously it was costing a little bit more than what we anticipated initially. So we've just reallocated some from some savings through another grant, another project within that grant stream, and brought it into the mix here. Overall, we're a little bit overspent in this area, mainly due to our revenue streams being lower than anticipated. So obviously with COVID coming through, our facilities haven't been fully utilised, but also our caravan park expenditure has been a little bit higher than we anticipated. So we're going to go through and review those costs and see why that is happening.
Through you, Mr. Chair. How is the Bill Rose Sporting Complex caravan, whatever the vehicles are, how the camping ground going? What's happening there?
We can take that on notice, councillor. I know that the facility is now open, unless the Director of Corporate would like to answer.
Yeah, the signage is up. The facility is available. The subdivision plan has gone through, so it's actually a road reserve. So RV parking is permittable on that particular site. So it's available. There is a restriction to 2 days, so that's the maximum you can stay. There's no facilities provided. We're expecting all the vehicles to be self-contained. So yeah, we wanted to get that ready before the air show, so there's additional accommodation options for tourists coming to town.
Thank you. And Mr. Chair, are campers who don't require electricity allowed to camp there?
Sorry, I didn't get that question.
Sorry, I asked Mr. Chair if campers who don't require electricity can camp there, like with just tents and their own gas burners and things.
No, it's for RVs and caravans.
Thank you.
Okay, moving down through our KPI side of things on 103 to 104, both red indicators here, obviously with the attendance at both our camping and caravan sites have been down due to COVID impacts and so forth. Community Connect services on page 105, no votes or surrenders here coming through, a little bit up on our budget, money in our revenue streams with a bit more money coming through from our Centrelink agency service, so that's quite good. Moving into economic promotion on pages 106 to 107, here we've got some votes and surrenders coming through. We secured some extra funding for our Summer Night Fund event down in here, going to be held in March. So we're more or less bringing that through in the mix. So there'll be an event happening during March. Overall, we're a little bit in front of budget, mainly due to our manager of business services being incapacitated during the back half of last year. And we've got a few savings in there in our salaries area coming through. Kpi side of things on page 108 to 109, both green indicators there, so there's nothing to highlight there. Private works on page 110. Here we've got no votes or surrenders, a little bit behind at the moment. Obviously, we're up a little bit in our revenue streams, but also in our private works expenditure. Overall, there'll be some work in progress in that will be invoiced out at a later date. So obviously, that'll catch up and make a profit in the mix. Overall, our actual level of return on completed projects is still at the 20%, so that's quite good. Real estate on pages 112 through to 113. Here we've just got a little vote, or a fairly sizable vote, I suppose, $70,000 coming through just to complete the roof replacement down here at Campbell's Corner. And that was a grant funded project, so we're just bringing through the grant funding side of that. Overall, we're tracking along okay. The revenue stream down there with COVID and rent relief is affect us a little bit. However, we'll anticipate that now with COVID easing, we'll be coming back on track coming into the mix. KPI side of things, we've got two green indicators and a red indicator. The red indicator is just in regards to review of our land registers. So what we were doing, we were looking at our land registers to see whether it's complete. That now has been completed. So that is now back up to the 50% mark. So we're back on track with that review.
The youth hostel Segenho, I thought that was supposed to be taken out of our books, and it's my recollection that Arrowfield was going to take it over.
No, I think that's on a Crown Reserve.
Yeah, and that's why they were going to take it over, because we didn't want it anymore.
Yeah, okay, so in that process, I think, remember there was that Crown Land project that we had to complete by last year, and then the government sort of did a backflip and said, well, it's not due yet. So that was going to be done in that process, where I think the plan was that we were going to resign as trust manager, and they were going to take it over.
Yeah.
That hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Moving into our sale yards area on page 117 to 118. Here we've got no votes or surrenders coming through, a little bit overspent to date, but that's mainly due to our reduced revenue streams coming through with our throughput. Overall, our expenditure has been pretty status quo when you ups and downs throughout the operating expenditure side of things. So the main driver for that is our revenue streams. Moving into our KPI side of things, we've got the two green indicators and the one red indicator. And the red indicator is where you'll see the numbers, how they have not met up to what our expectations were. So we had effectively a target of just under 17,000 head to the end of December, and we're achieving just under 14,000. So we're about 3,000 head down at this point. Moving into our golf course side of things on page 122, here we've got no votes or surrenders coming through, a little bit overspent in our costs to date, so we'll continue to monitor that as it's coming through. Moving into tourism and promotion on pages 123 to 124, here we've got a little bit of a vote coming through, mainly additional funding we received late from the Austrade funding, which is more or less was applied for with the Scone Horse Festival music concert. So we've more or less dispersed that straight to the Horse Festival to cover off some of their costs in regards to that. So that funding was earmarked for that project. So apart from that, as you can see, we're a little bit overspent at this point in time. just in regards to our admin costs and our building maintenance. So we're reviewing those costs at this point for the VICs coming through. Obviously, we've done a few rectifications down at the VIC with the Scone Neighbourhood Resource Centre going down and working out of that facility now.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Can I ask why some of the activity services don't have KPIs, like the Scone Golf Course? Why? Because some do and some don't. There've been a couple of others, but I'm just thinking we've just been through the Scone Golf Course. So why isn't there a KPI chart for that one?
Normally, if there's a measure that we can put into place for the community that would be of benefit, then we would put a KPI in there. There's probably been nothing that would be significant to the community to be a KPI. A lot of it would be statistically based, and that could be around usage of the golf course and numbers on the golf course and things like that. But whether or not it's a benefit to the community, it's up to the council to decide that.
But well, through you, Mr. Chair, I'm just concerned that the golf course is costing us a lot of money. So probably we should be actually seeing that on a chart.
Yeah, we can take that on notice and have a look at it with the coming up of the Depop in the current period, and look at whether or not there is a KPI that would be beneficial for the community to look at.
Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Look, I agree. Even if it's broken down into number of people playing golf there, how regularly they're doing it. Also, be interesting to see in terms of tourism, that cross section of their visitors or local players, how many tournaments are held there, things like that, to really look at usage.
Yeah, a lot of that would be coming from a third party, being the RSL Club, because they effectively control golf at the facility down there. We receive a maintenance contribution from the RSL Club. We do get the course fees coming through, but a lot of that is ticketing based on people just turning up and going, pushing a button and getting a ticket out. So getting it from from outside our shire, that would be very difficult to achieve. But we can have a look at different measures.
It'd be interesting to see if, for the ticketing, if there were different prices for visitors compared to locals and things like that, just to, I think the more data we can gather there, the better shot we've got at making sure that thing breaks even. Yeah,
the ticketing side of things is mainly based around adult, children, whether you're a member or a non-member, that type of scenario. Yeah. So they don't really segregate out to postal addresses or anything like that. So they'd be limited on that basis, I believe, Councillor.
Okay.
Moving into, so where do we get to? For tourism, so we more or less, as you can see, with the KPIs for our tourism on 125 through to 127, we've got two red indicators and a green indicator, and obviously our numbers have been down at our VICs coming through, which hopefully will increase over the course of the next year or so as tourism starts to pick up again within the country. Moving on to our noxious plants and control and vermin control on 128. Here it's nearly spot on budget. That's more or less our money that we pay to the Weeds Authority in regards to a lot of noxious plants. Stormwater management on pages 129 through to 130. Here we've got no votes or surrenders coming through, a little bit underspent at the moment, just with our stormwater maintenance. So obviously we'll need to increase our level of maintenance coming through, and also our capital works program as well, and push that up through the mix. So as you can see on our KPIs on pages 131 through to 134, we've got two green indicators and two red indicators coming through. And a red indicator comes in regards to the complaints about our drainage overflow, which is our maintenance issues. So obviously we need to address that in the mix. Moving on to street cleaning on 135. Here we've got no votes or surrenders and nearly spot on budget overall. So there's nothing to highlight there.
Yeah, just on that, can we get another KPI placed in there that the non-CBD roads? So break it down. So yes, we know they're doing the main street, but I want to know how many streets they're doing outside of
we
Kelly and Vinaka and
We can
Right.
take that on notice and put it into our next round of Depop coming through, but we can obtain that information provided the councillors as a statistic at this point in time, but we can put that in as a KPI in
Yep.
the mix for the next Depop.
Thank you.
Waste management on pages 137 through to 139. Here you'll see that we've just, again, got just a bit of an offsetter coming through with our bulk collection and our landfill at Scone, just moving some costs around there and a bit of money going into our landfill development up here at Scone. So overall, as you can see, there's a massive change in our surplus there, mainly driven around our operating expenditure, which is a timing thing, it times out, and also our capital expenditure for our moving bay effectively coming through. So apart from those two items, nothing to highlight there. Obviously, those come back into play by the end of the financial year. KPI side of things, we've got 4 green indicators there coming through for our information in regards to our landfill sites. So that's a good indicator, knowing that that's happening. Moving into our rates and interest side of things, on page 144, no votes or surrenders coming through here, nearly spot on target in the mix. A little bit up on our rates income, which is good, but we're down on our interest revenue. As you can see from our investment schedules, our rates are very paltry. So obviously, hopefully the rates will outweigh the decline in the interest. Overall, that KPI is just in regards to our 6-monthly review of the CSP, and we've got a green indicator there. Council services on page 147. Here you've got no votes or surrenders coming through. A little bit in front of budget at the moment, obviously with the election and so forth, and there was a period of time where we didn't have a full cast of councillors. So we've got a little bit of a saving in there, but we've used some of that saving when we held the COVID shots out at Merriwar. So the COVID clinics that we had out at Merriwar. So we used about $8,000 towards those costs coming through. Moving through then to health services on page 149.
Sorry, just back on that. What were our costs for the COVID clinic? Because I thought it was state government run. So why did it cost us $8,000?
We provided the facility and staffing as a pro bono to assist with the New South Wales Health to do.
So it cost us $8,000 to allow them to be in the hall. And how many staff did we have?
We'll probably have to take that on notice.
Because that just seems an exorbitant amount. I mean, I was out there at both clinics, and you know, the flying doctors are pretty self-sufficient. Like, I couldn't imagine we would have needed that many staff once they showed them where the chairs were.
Yeah. Councillor, we can provide a breakdown
Yeah.
of that $8,000.
Yeah, thank you.
So, but I think the actual efficiency of the rule, that flying doctor service wasn't efficient at all. That's what we've been led to believe. So it was very haphazardly done. And it took council a lot of operational costs to actually organise it correctly.
I'd be surprised if there were all flying doctors if that was the case, but a report would be great.
Yep, that's fine. Moving into the KPIs in regards to, back to health services, I beg your pardon, down to health services here. Here we've got an offsetter coming through again internally for 20,000, just more or less moving a bit of money from our on-site sewer management up into our customer service area there. But overall, we're pretty well tracking on budget. KPI side of things, 1 amber and 1 red indicator coming through. And obviously the red indicator, we've had a few vacancies in our area doing the on-site sewer management inspections, and it's a little bit behind target at this point in time. So hopefully we'll catch that up over the course of the next 6 months, as far as we can anyway. Moving into emergency housing, here we've got no votes or surrenders. We've got the facility now up and going next door, and it's been utilised, which has been tremendous. So it's been a good win for council and the community itself. Low income housing on page 153. Here we've got no votes or surrenders coming through. Again, just with our low income housing, we've providing the service to the community coming through, and it's not costing too much funds, and it's a great benefit to the disadvantaged coming in. Moving into our KPIs on 154, we've got a green indicator there, so there's nothing to highlight there. Moving into public cemeteries on 155. Here we've got no votes or surrenders coming through, and we're nearly spot on budget with the public cemeteries. A little bit under in our revenue, but we're also a little bit under in our costs as well. Yes, true. Moving into our KPIs, we've got one red indicator and an amber indicator coming through. So obviously we'll continue to monitor those as we go through the mix and deliver the capital works in the mix for those KPIs. Public conveniences on 158, no votes or surrenders coming through here. A little bit overspending just our servicing of our public amenities at this point, but we'll look at that as we come through. On 159 is the KPI, a green indicator there. So our complaints side of things is being kept well in check, which is great. On 160, we've got street lighting coming through. Our utility costs are way down to where we thought, which is a great thing. Probably just a bit of timing of a couple of invoices maybe still to come in for the end of December, which may affect that slightly, but I think that we're underspent overall in that program, which is great. And the LED rollout will have a major effect on that as well. KPI side of things, complaints in regards to street lighting is really good, so there's nothing to highlight there. Town planning on pages 162 to 163. Here we've got a small vote coming through in regards to a bit of extra stat fees coming in and just offsetting a bit of cost that we had left over on the planning portal that's been implemented throughout council, which has been great. Overall, we're pretty well tracking on track coming through the mix. Moving into our KPI side of things on 164 to 66. 3 green indicators there, so we're meeting all the targets in regards to our planning side of the business. 167, here we've got a small vote and surrender happening in there just with our building services and customer services, just moving a bit of money inside itself again. Overall, our costs are well down in this area. We've had a number of vacancies in these positions, so we've got less cost, but our stat fees are actually up, so we've got a win both ways. But we've actually got staff that need a bit of a rest, so we've got contractors going in to help out with a lot of the DA process coming in. So it makes it very good.
Well, sorry, just does the planning portal actually make that a little bit easier for you?
Yeah, no, it doesn't.
Geez, that's money well spent by the state, isn't it?
Moving into our KPI side of things on 168, 169. Here we've got just a green indicator and an amber indicator, and the amber indicator is only just touched over from a green. Quarry operations on pages 170. No votes or surrenders here. A little bit behind budget at this point in time. Our revenue streams are up, so we're utilising our material, but also the cost to extract that material a little bit up at this point. So obviously we must have a stockpile out there. We'll be utilising that moving forward for a lower cost. Animal control on page 172, no votes or surrenders here, nearly spot on target coming through. And as indicated in the red indicators in the summary, we've got the red indicator for the rehoming of the animals. Apart from that, nothing else to highlight there. Emergency services on pages 175 to 176, no votes or surrenders coming through. A little bit in front of budget here, mainly due to just capital works program, the SES shed up in Murrundi, that's now nearing completion. So that'll bring that back into alignment with the budget.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Chair. Just back to animal control
Yep.
and building maintenance and higher than expected maintenance.
Yep.
What happened there?
That would be just routine maintenance that happens throughout the year.
Thanks.
Moving into our fire services and fire protection. Here we've put in a vote in regards to a couple of sheds. We've had a meeting with the district RFS commander, and they're wanting us to complete a couple of amenities at 2 of the fire sheds. So hopefully that will be completed by year end coming through. Apart from that, we're pretty well chugging on budget. A little bit spent on the RFS vehicles, just getting them ready for the fire season coming up to summer during December. But apart from that, all good. Local government regulation enforcement, no votes or surrenders here. And we're effectively in front of budget coming through. Revenue streams are down a little bit, but also our costs are down as well. And that's mainly due to a few staff vacancies and absences at this point. Overall, with our KPI side of things, we've got one green indicator and an amber indicator. We're almost hitting the mark in regards to our pool inspections. So obviously we'll meet that mark by the end of the year. Community halls and centres. Here we've got no votes or surrenders coming through, a little bit in front of budget, mainly to do with the Marundi War Memorial Gates, which is just waiting on one final bit of item to complete that project, and it will be underspent by the end of the period. So once those costs come through, we will surrender the remainder of those funds that are savings and put them into another part of the project as well, into the grant funded projects as well. The actual KPIs on pages 185 to 186. Here, as you can see, COVID has affected our community hall bookings, so they're a little bit behind at this point in time, which is our red indicator. Cultural services on pages 187 to 188. Here we were successful in getting additional funding for Australia Day COVID safe measures, so we've more or less allocated that straight to the cost for the COVID safe measures coming through. So overall, we're a little bit in front of budget, mainly due to that grant funding and a little bit underspend in our operating expenditure. KPI side of things on 189, it's more or less a green indicator there, so nothing to highlight there. Recreation and culture with the museums, no votes or surrenders coming through, and we're pretty well tracking on par with the museums. Haven't had any requests for any work to be done down at the Scone Museum. So obviously the staffing, the volunteers down there will ask once they require anything to be done. Other sport and rec on 191, no votes or surrenders coming through, and nearly spot on budget coming through. And our KPIs on 192 to 194, all green indicators there, so we're going quite well in regards to our sporting and rec activities. Parks and gardens on 195 through to 196. Here we've got a vote coming through and a bit of movement of some costs. With a new grant funded project that we were successful in obtaining some funds for, and it's more or less the Amaroo Park play space area. So we've got some extra funding through, and everyone can play grant funding. So we've allocated our playground equipment upgrades to that project so that we can upgrade our equipment and everything at that facility at Amaroo Park. And we've more or less coupled that with the grant funding coming through. This project will probably run over the course of 2 years. So it'll be done, finished off in next financial year with the remaining part of the grant funding, which was effectively another $40,000. So overall, apart from that, everything else is pretty well tracking on par. We've got a number of projects that are continuing in our capital expenditure space there, all of which will be completed by year end.
Does that mean that we've removed Amaroo from the maintenance schedule? So, you know, because it was pretty high on the schedule. So can we bump someone else up on there?
Yeah, Amaroo was the main playground that needed replaced. With regards to the grant funding, we'll look at the specifications around that, because there was different specifications for it, but that will be part of the brief, is to try and improve the Amaroo Park playground area playground gym.
Yeah, no,
And then
that's
we'll
fine.
move
But
up to another one
yeah, because
from
we
our
already,
next 60,000
yeah,
to something else.
lovely. Thank you.
So, and that'll go on the priority list, obviously with infrastructure services. Moving into our KPIs here in our parks and gardens, we've got two red indicators here. So we need improvement in these areas. One is in our capital works space, which will meet target by year end, because we're actually finishing off a number of projects at the moment. But the other one is in regards to our unsatisfactory cleanliness and maintenance. So obviously we need to look at those and address that coming through to make sure our facilities are up to scratch for the tourists and community at large.
Through you, Mr. Chair, with the comment, wet and warmer weather has increased rate of growth and staff availability. I mean, it's a good thing it's been wet, obviously, to a point, but that should be factored in though. So we should be able to be across our gardens and our parks.
Unfortunately, we have limited resources with actual parks and garden staff obviously out there. And as the lawns are growing, requiring probably double the mowing. So we don't have double the people to actually do that mowing. So that probably has a factor of capacity to actually mow every facility twice instead of only once. So obviously with the weather as it's been now without as much rain, we should be able to get on top of that issue going forward. Moving into our public libraries area on 199 to 200, no votes or surrenders coming through here.
Oh. Sorry,
Yep,
Councillor, go ahead.
Through the chair there, just to further that question from Councillor Abbott, is there any opportunity in those high peak areas to utilise contractors?
Yes, there would be an opportunity to do that. Normally we try to have work for our staff to continue going constantly throughout that period, but it's also the availability of the contractors, because they would be also smashed in regards to doing a lot of other mowing around the Shire for domestic and commercial areas. But it's something, Councillor, that we can definitely, I can take back to the infrastructure services. Okay. Moving into the public libraries again, here we've got no votes or surrenders coming through. A little bit underspent at the moment. As I said, there's a bit of a vacancy in regards to our admin area in the library, so we've got a bit of a saving there. So as the director mentioned earlier, hopefully we'll be putting on a technical services officer in the near future. And that should hopefully correct our red KPIs as indicated earlier, Councillor Abbott. So we've got 3 red indicators there and an amber and a green indicator. Moving into our sporting grounds and venues, here we've got no votes or surrenders coming through. Pretty well, we're pretty well on the mark overall when you look at the major part of the budget. Capital expenditure, again, we're a little bit behind in our capital expenditure program there. But as I said earlier, a lot of these are grant funded projects which will be delivered by year end. So we'll catch that up relatively quickly over the next 6 months. As you can see on our next sheet there with our KPIs on 207 and 208 there, we've got an amber indicator. So our capital expenditure isn't too bad based on the volume of CapEx there. But it's an amber indicator which will turn green by year end.
Sorry, just can I ask, White Park revenue was only 5,600.
We have a separate area, Councillor.
Ah, lovely. Thank you.
That'll be journaled over into that separate area. Swimming pools.
Sorry, Robin, can you just note that Councillor Abbott's just stepping out?
Moving into swimming pools, here we've got votes and surrenders coming through. With the pools, we had 2 chlorine dosing units that require to be put into the the Merriwar and Scone pools. So we've utilised some of our other capital works for sort of like pool painting and maintenance coming through. We've allocated those to those dosing plants so that the season could go ahead unhindered. So overall, we're a little bit overspent at the moment, money due to those dosing plants being spent.
Through you, Mr. Chair, were there any delays in getting the pools up and running because of the state of the filtration?
No, not as far as I'm aware. I'll take it on notice though, and find out from the infrastructure guys. Yep. Moving into the KPIs, we have a green indicator there. Aerodrome, page 212, 213. Here we've got no votes or surrenders coming through. And as highlighted earlier, our revenue streams are a little bit down, and our capital expenditure is a little bit behind at this point in time. So that's why we're sitting at a little bit overspent at the moment, I beg your pardon. So that's why we're a little bit overspent in this facility at this point in time. But apart from that, there's nothing else to highlight there. And the indicators on pages 214 to 215 are both green indicators, so there's nothing to highlight there. Moving into our bridges area, here we've got no votes or surrenders coming through. As you can see, that it's well and truly underspent at this point in time, mainly due to our capital works program. As you can see, as highlighted in our summary pages, the Cameron's Bridge at Rookel is continuing on schedule. It's just with a bit of timing of the contractors' invoices. Excuse me. And overall, our maintenance for our bridges is down as well. Obviously, with our replacement program, maintenance on a lot of our bridges has reduced. So as we'll have a few savings there by the year end, which we'll put back into our renewal programs for bridges. Excuse me. Moving into the KPIs on 218. Yep.
Go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. Through the Chair there, just a matter of interest on the bridges. Dartbrook Bridge, I see the very low maintenance value there, and I believe it's not up for replacement directly. It's got quite a significant amount of damage on it at the moment. I wonder whether that's under review at all.
I'll take it on notice, Councillor. The Dartbrook Bridge will be replaced in the second phase of the bridge replacement program. So we've got the funding secured to do those works, and that tender will be going out probably over the course of the next couple of months. But I'll take it on notice and get the guys from infrastructure to go and have a look and review it for you.
No, terrific. Thank you.
Moving into footpaths and cycleways. Here we've got no votes or surrenders coming through. Overall, we're a little bit underspent. Money, again, in regards to our maintenance on our footpaths. So we're underspent in that area there, and also underspent in our capital expenditure. We've got a number of projects that are just starting to kick off, so the spend on a lot of those footpath renewals and replacements will pick up momentum coming through. Moving into our KPI side of things on 221 through to 223, got two green indicators and a red indicator, and obviously the red indicator was, as highlighted before, was about the unsafe conditions of some of our footpaths. So obviously the boys will need to go out and review that coming through the next 6 months. Moving on to local roads, here we've got the big vote coming through, which was highlighted earlier in regards to the funding that came through for Barrington Forest Road Stage 2, the milestone payment. So obviously we've put that down into an RA there. It's the biggest thing that's happened within the last 2 months in the budget side of things. Overall, you can see in the overall surplus there is about $2.1 million, of which 1.7 is of the item at the top. being the additional funding that we received, but also our capital expenditure is behind schedule at the moment by about 600,000. So we'll be obviously catching that up as we're coming through. So there's a number of items in there that are well entrenched with commencement and continuing with those projects over the next 6 months to be completed by year end. Moving into our KPIs on 227 through to 230. Here we've got one green indicator, but we've also got 3 red indicators. So these are the areas where we need to look at trying to improve. So obviously there's a few there that are in regards to our reseal program, which has been delayed by a couple of months. So it should come back into parity. Our length of unsealed network inspected. So we just need to get out there and start looking at our roads and inspecting our roads coming through. Obviously with the flood damage that we've had, our resources have been limited, but also we'll be able to increase our inspection regime with that flood damage work, which would be good. Moving into our next line, which is our RMS State Roads. So no votes or surrenders here. As mentioned earlier, our actual request coming through for our state roads has been quite limited. But as I said earlier, we've actually secured a bit more work on the Golden Highway now. So it should help the revenue side of it and the profitability side of it, of the operation as well.
Just on that, sorry, the amount of people that we send out there compared to how much profit, which is the word you're not allowed to use.
Surplus.
Yeah, surplus. What's it worth to us? Is it worth those guys actually being on our own roads instead of being out there and let RMS do their own work?
Yes, it is, councillor, because it actually provides work for our staff out there, and it's funded. So if we didn't have that funding for it, we wouldn't be able to pay those staff. So it's both sides of the coin. We don't make a profit. We utilise our facilities out there to use them elsewhere within the organisation.
But when those crews are working on that job, we've got less crews working on our own roads, I take it.
Yeah, then council, it comes back to the dollars and cents of what council can afford to do. So with a lot of things that you've got with a balanced budget, you can only live within your means. And with regards to the staff over there, effectively, if you've got 8 staff on the Golden Highway, we've got 8 people gainfully employed. If we didn't have that contract, we wouldn't have the funds to keep that workforce in action, because we don't physically have the dollars and cents to do it. So it's a dollars and cents sort of side of things.
Okay, so it sounds like there's a dedicated team that just does this funding separate to the rest of the roads we do?
A lot of the work happens over there from the state road.
I'd be interested in seeing a cost-benefit analysis on this, because I just don't see the point in. I understand it's an employment thing, and I get that. That's important, but presumably that work's going to have to be done anyway. So they're still going to be employed, whether it's by us or by someone else. But that's 8 seats in trucks, graders, lollipops that aren't being worked on our roads. So I understand, but could I just ask if we can do some sort of a cost benefit analysis?
Yeah, we'll take it on notice.
We can bring something back.
And it's not so much cost benefit analysis directly either. It's more just in terms of the focus on our own roads and getting them done. I mean, that's one of the highest priorities for ratepayers. So just looking at the time and resources that takes away from our own roads when those crews aren't available.
Yeah. So we'll provide a report back, councillor, in regards to it, and it'll be pretty well self-explanatory. Moving into our regional roads area, here we've got no votes or surrenders coming through. We're pretty well on track with our regional roads at this point in time. Obviously, we've got a lot of work happening in our capital expenditure space. But we're keeping on track with that. So there's a lot of work to be finalised over the next 6 months, but we're attending to those works. KPI side of things on 232 through to 235. Here we've got 3 green indicators and a red indicator. And the red indicator is more or less the reseal program. So obviously that, as I said earlier, it was delayed for a couple of months, and it'll catch up coming through the mix. Excuse me. Moving into transport auxiliaries, no votes or surrenders coming through here. Pretty well tracking okay with regards to the CBD and our 133 Kelly Street project down there. And we're a little bit underspent in our operational expenditure, money due to line marking of our reseal program. So it'll catch up as it comes through, but nothing else to highlight there. Moving into our KPIs on pages 238, 239, we've got 1 amber indicator and a red indicator here. So obviously the red indicator that we've got showing there is the identification of traffic signs and line marking, is whether or not it's been completed. Obviously with the delay in the reseal program, our line marking is a little bit behind track at the moment, but we'll catch that up with that reseal line marking. Coming now through to water supply. So on 240 to 241, here we've got a small vote coming through, mainly to put some money back into the cashless treatment plant SCADA technology over there. So it's a carryover project from last year. So that's now been completed. Overall, we're pretty well on track with regards to our operation out at Merriwar, a little bit under in our usage of water, but that's been offset by a little bit underspent or a little bit less maintenance required over there. Marundi Water on pages 242 to 243, no votes or surrenders coming through here. And we're pretty well tracking online coming through. A little bit, as I said earlier, with the water consumption, a little bit down on that. But in Marundi, we've also had a little bit of extra cost in our maintenance area in the pump station and the water treatment activities. So it's made it a little bit overspent, but it's one of those cyclic things that goes up and down with the maintenance required. Moving into Scone water supply on 244 through to 246. Here we've got no votes or surrenders coming through here. And it's a little bit in front of budget at the moment by about 100,000. Capital expenditure is the main factor behind that one. We're a little bit behind in our capital expenditure area by about 120,000. It was offset also, again, as I highlighted in the summary, by the water usage consumption. So apart from that, there's nothing to highlight in there. Moving into our KPIs on 247 to 248. Here we've got 1 green indicator and 1 red indicator. The red indicator is effectively the water asset renewal percentage. So what this more or less represents is the assets that we've actually renewed against the depreciation charge for our full water infrastructure. Overall, we've got a major part of our capital expenditure renewal programs happening in the second 6 months. So it will catch itself up by the year end. Moving into sewage on pages 249 through to 250 for Merriwar. No votes or surrenders coming through. A little bit in front of budget here. A little bit extra in grant funding from the cashless sewer scheme over there. But and also our capital expenditure is a little bit underspent to date, mainly in regards to our Merriwar sewer treatment plant renewals. So it's providing a bit more of a surplus on the bottom line to date, but obviously those renewals will be completed over the course of the year. Moving into Marundi sewage on pages 251 through to 252. Here we've got a couple of votes coming through, just a bit more of a manhole renewal and replacement required to come through. At Marundi. Overall, we've got a little bit in front of budget at the moment, which is mainly due to our CCTV works that haven't been completed to date. So we'll be looking at doing that over the course of the next couple of months in the mix. Moving into Scone and Aberdeen sewage, no votes or surrenders here coming through. We're well and truly in front of budget on the bottom line there, mainly due to the capital expenditure side of things. And as highlighted in the summary, we've got a number of capital works that are underspent in regards to the sewerage area for renewals. Obviously, we've awarded a tender for some sewer relining works just in the last couple of months. So obviously that will catch itself up in the mix coming through.
Through you, Mr. Chair, just again, the comment the number of customer complaints with sewage, again, that's just kind of out of whack. I think we covered that earlier, but.
Yes, correct. Yes, correct, councillor. So we've noted that down to get some clarity around that. But as you can see, our indicators in regards to the sewage area are all red. So we need to definitely look at that area and improve that.
Yeah, and I'm just a bit concerned about the other measure for renewal as a percentage of depreciation, because although, yes, we've got something coming online with the relining tender, it just worries me that that's so low and how that might blow out.
Yes, correct. Yeah. Totally agree, councillor. Righto then. Now, next we move down into just a summary of our capital works expenditure. So obviously encompassed in all those service reports, you've got the capital expenditure, and being a major part of our budget process, more or less giving you an indication of how those capital expenditure projects are progressing year to date and what is the revised budget against the original budget. So if you go down to 275, as you can see, we've only spent, what, $13.8 million out of a revised budget of 40.5 million. So obviously we've got 26 million to spend within 6 months. So that is a large chunk of money. So that's double what we've done in the first 6 months. So, so we're very mindful of that. And that's why we're continually monitoring it on a monthly basis to look at what's realistic by year end. But that summary is effectively for councillors to go through and look at and raise any questions that they may have.
Would we be able to get a financial report on Gumman Place? Because it seems to be running at a huge loss. But then again, I'm looking at line items here with a hostel expansion. What was the expansion? And there's been various upgrades. So I'm wondering if that's contributed to it running over budget and the upgrades for compliance. So I'm just trying to get a read on, what we've had to do to bring it up to standard and what that long term may look like.
Yep, definitely, councillor. Can bring that back to all councillors.
And I'd also question if we've done additional units out there for Government Place, if we've got bed vacancies, why that is. Did I read this right, that there's been an expansion there for 2 more beds?
Correct.
No, through the chair, there hasn't been any expansion. We're just looking at some plans at this stage, which is what the commission likes to see, what the councils or what the services plans are going into the future.
Okay.
Councillor Williamson.
Through you, Mr. Chair, just on Government Place there, it notes there's a review pending. Just wondering when that's going to occur there, Police Director.
Just through you, Mr. Chair, there will be a briefing for councillors prior to the next council meeting this month.
Terrific, thank you.
Any further questions?
Yeah. The Campbell's Corner revised budget. Now, I'm trying to find the line item there. I found it in my pre-reading, but I can't seem to find it now. The roofing, yeah. Whereabouts is that in here?
That is underneath real estate.
Uh-huh.
And it was 70,000.
Yeah.
And that was to finalise the project.
So there was a zero budget allocated. So this was the roof replacement that went through a little while ago. Is that what we're talking about? Okay.
So initially, in last year's budget, when we were doing the Depop up, it was anticipated that that roof would be completely finished by year end.
Yeah.
So therefore, it never got into the current year's
I see.
Depop. So what happens with a lot of things, councillor, when those projects don't meet completion by year end, we'll roll them. We'll roll them into this year.
Yeah.
But we need to take up votes for the dollars and cents.
Yep.
That's right.
Understood. Yep, that makes sense. And was the variance of 70K, was that just on quote to what was delivered, or were there any issues?
No, there was no issues in regards to that.
It actually came in under budget.
Oh, okay.
Quite significantly. The budget was 450 and Graham came in like around 400, wasn't it? 420?
I see. Yep.
Yeah, Graham was the project manager. And one of the reasons it was delayed, it was difficult getting contractors at that period in time.
Yep.
I think we went to tender and we actually did quite well in terms of the budget on that one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, councillors, we'll go back to page 35. Corporate point 02.3 operational
Sorry,
report.
I've just got another couple of questions. Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to reconcile between the document I had on file and this one. Now, I've got page 282, but I'm not sure if it marries up again. But there's a cost in for the airport for Paul Bennett running the project management for 6 months, 182,000. Does that include him actually doing the displays, or that's
the
separate
next.
again?
That's the next. That's contractors and expense report.
Whereabouts is that?
Sorry,
I'm just getting a bit
So
confused.
276 is that's the next report.
Oh, right. Okay,
Yeah.
then.
So
Yes, I
we'll-
skipped ahead.
Yeah, we
Okay.
will get that
Yep.
one.
No worries.
So back to 35, sorry. Recommendation that the committee, 1, note the comments on the budget review by the manager's budget holders. 2, adopt the request variation as detailed in the budget review. 3, note the capital budget review by the manager's budget holders. And 4, note the comments on the capital budget review by the managers and budget holders. Mover and seconder. Moved by
I'll
councillor Abbott, seconded councillor Flaherty. All those in favour? The ayes have it. Now, we'll go across to 276. Corporate .2.4 contractor and expense report. You sure you don't want some water? Okay.
The schedules are there for councillors to look at.
Sorry.
The schedules are there for councillors to look at. That's all right.
So yeah, the question I asked before, consider it asked again. So someone answer that for me.
Director of Corporate.
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
The figure for the 6-month project management for the Warbirds to Paul Bennett for 182,000. Does that include his display and all that kind of stuff, or is that purely project management?
That's the whole delivery of the project, the aircraft, the on-ground stuff.
Right. So that's the actual air show on the day
mar-
as well.
Marketing the whole.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Yep.
That went to council a couple months ago, so there is a report
Okay.
that you could have a look at.
Also, do we have any more information on the airport surface, the runways, or the airside infrastructure, runway, taxiway, except with what that dispute is?
Yeah, through yeah, that's considered.
I've jotted it all down here because it was too hard to use the iPad, and now I'm skipping ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's all right. So is there any other, sorry, is there any further questions on 02.4, the contractors and expense report?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, on page 279, the Scone Regional Airport Contracts Review and Advice. What, is that possible for council? So what does that entail? Because why are we doing that again?
No, that was effectively looking at the aeroplanes that were coming in that were going to be in the hangar. So it was effectively the agreement for those items to be on the floor in the hangar.
And is that possible for councillors to have to see that contract? And also, is it possible, because I did ask some time ago for a legal briefing on how the contract affects us and what the legal implications are for councillors as well?
Director of
We'll take that on notice, Councillor Abbott.
Thank you.
Okay, no further questions. Lovely.
There was
Yeah.
Sorry. Yes, just in relation to Paul Bennett, the project managing. So why wasn't that included in the budget? And who decided that Mr. Bennett would be the project manager?
With regards to that schedule there, councillor, that's pretty well contracts that we've entered into that haven't gone through a tender. That's more than $50,000. So we've gone into a written contract with Paul Bennett for the management and providing of that air show, but it hasn't. It's a written contract and it's over 50,000. So it's a requirement for us to actually display it to councillors.
So can we see that contract too?
You can. I just want to explain this report for councillors. There's this thing called the quarterly budget review statement, which is part of the OLG requirements that councillors have to report on certain matters every quarter. And this is meeting that requirement. And one of the things is just in terms of the quarter to report on every contract that's been awarded worth more than $50,000. So every quarter is different. So that's what this schedule is. We actually have to bring a report back on everything that's over $50,000 that has been awarded by council.
And Mr. Chair, why wasn't that contract put out to tender?
It was underneath the tender threshold.
So just to remind me, Mr. Chair, what is the tender threshold?
250.
250,000.
Yeah, the report did come to council. There's only two people who provide this service, and this particular provider was significantly advantageous.
Is it the kind of contract though where, yeah, obviously Paul runs the displays and does that, and there's very few people who do that, I understand that, but in terms of the broader project management, there's lots of people who do that. So I'm wondering if, was considered if it be broken up into areas of specialisation.
Yeah, I'll actually refer you back to the council report, which you can have a look at, which actually breaks down the components of the contract. Our staff are actually doing a fair bit as well in conjunction with Mr. Bennett. So it's really it's a joint venture.
Thank you. And also, Mr. Chair, so with the project managing Warbirds, Councillor Flaherty's already asked questions on that. So I just want to ask, does that mean that Upper Hunter Shire Council isn't doing any of the event management? What through you, Mr. Chair, what are we doing any event management of this event, or is Mr. Bennett doing all of it?
It's we're really doing it together. Mr. Bennett is doing the elements that I spoke to you before. We're doing things like traffic control and all that sort of thing. We're going to have volunteers working there. We're going to have our people on the ground, just making sure everything runs smoothly. But the main aspect of the air show is the provision of aeroplanes and all the proceedings of the day.
So there's no event manager then from council? No, we don't have an event manager? I'm just clarifying.
We have a tourism and events coordinator who's virtually working most of her time on this project.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay,
I think it'd just be really helpful if we just had a bit of a breakdown of that as, who's doing what and percentage of what council's doing compared to.
Yeah, we actually have a project plan, and we actually have everything broken down into tasks, who's doing what.
Great.
So we do have that, yeah.
Excellent, thank you.
It's been very, very time consuming for us as well over the last couple of months.
Okay. A mover and a seconder for the recommendation that the committee, one, note the contractors listing for the period, and number two, note the consultancy and legal expenses report for the period.
I'll move it.
And Adam, there you go. And Councillor Williamson has seconded it. All those in favour? Aye. The ayes have it. Moving across, page 281. Taking cracking time here. Corporate 0.02.5 Scone Airport project update. Chris, are you there, Chris?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me?
Lovely, I can.
Okay. Just before I start, I'm working from home and I have a tradesman that's to come after 11 o'clock. However, if he does arrive whilst I'm speaking, unfortunately, I'll just have to pause for a minute to let him in. So if that happens, I apologise.
That's fine.
Okay, we'll make a start on the report. I can't see the page numbers on my screen, but you're on the start of the report there. So I'll just go through it. The report, the airside infrastructure contract was completed last year in April. There were some defect rectification works to some drainage areas, and they were completed by the contractor in January this year. And whilst they're doing the defects, we had some additional works to improve the drainage at the southern airport. That was carried out by the contractor as well while they were up doing the defect rectification works. That way they only relocate up here once.
This is breaking up. Chris, have you got another area that you could be in?
Might help. Adam, would you be able to switch your camera off? That can sometimes help with bandwidth. And Chris, if yours continues, maybe you switch your camera off and we just hear audio, if that helps.
Okay, I'll switch my camera off. Does that work better?
That's better.
Okay. I'll carry on. Thank you. Yeah, so the additional drainage works were completed while the contractor was up doing defect rectification work in January. So all of that work is now completed and very successful. There was an inspection of the runway, taxiways and apron in December when the weather started to warm that revealed some defects in the surface. We sent a defect notice off to the contractor. They refuted the claim. We've had some the designer come and have a look and inspect and write a report. We've had meetings with all parties, with the contractors, the subcontractors and the designers. It's agreed that there is some issues with the surfaces and that some rectification work needs to be done. And we're now working through what work will be done that's different for different areas, the runway versus the taxiways versus the apron. And so we're now currently working on how we can improve the surfaces there and address those issues. The Hunter Warbirds contract, that's meeting the scheduled progress for the closeout program. It's nearing the end. There's a lot of things have been completed in the last month and a lot of things will be completed within the next month. They'll be finished their works in the first week in March, but that's in the terminal. But yeah, the hangar, they've just about completed everything in the hangar, and the planes will start to be moved in next week. And the week after that, the contractor will come in to install the audio visual. The terminal, we're just finalising the final details of things like furniture and a few things, decorative items on the walls. So they'll be completed in the first week in March, and it's anticipated that one of the bigger risks, I guess, is still COVID-related issues. Now, we've been affected by COVID in the last month. The floor polishing contractors or floor grinding contractors were affected by COVID. There was a delay there, and also the fencing contractors doing the perimeter fencing were put off by a week as well. So that's still recognised as a risk. Budget. The Hunt of Warbirds is on budget and it'll be completed under budget. But we've made a note there that the rectification works that may have to take place on the surfaces of the airport, that's undetermined. So we're just raising the flag early there that we're unsure of the monetary impacts of what might happen there. Warbirds, as I said, it's 90%, or it's more than 90% complete now, but when I wrote this report, it was. And with the contingency on the Hunt of Warbirds, we're down to 20,000, but we're just about finished everything now, so that's in control there. All the variations for both airside and Hunt of Warbirds are approved, resolved. There's a couple of late ones that have just been for like $2,000 agreed in principle. I've just got to get the paperwork done. There's on the design, as I said, we're still just finalising internal design and furniture, and we've got RHM doing the design for the poles, for the pole mounted planes. Risks, the impact of remedial works, and anything that's, any additional variation work, and that's things that we don't know. If something pops up, then because we're getting close, drawing close to the end, that could cause a delay, but there's nothing that we're aware of at the moment. Contractors are all in place. Kingston doing the Warbirds, Darracon will have finished that additional works now, and Freeman Ryan Design doing the audio visual. Work health and safety, no incidents in the past month, and the management of that aspect has been very good on the whole project. So there's a list of things there that have been completed. They include, I won't go through all of them, but they include the hangar cladding and the internal painting, the flooring inside the hangar, the grinding of the concrete floor. Well, it's actually complete now, but by the time of writing this report, it was underway. The track lighting's installed in the hangar, in the terminal. The painting's done, the tiling's complete, the kitchens are being fitted out, the bathrooms are being fitted out. Outside the hangar, the water tank slabs are poured and the rainwater tank's installed. The footing for the plane on the poles installed inside. The balustrade is installed and the viewing platform is installed. So things are looking very complete inside now. The next period of time, next month, we'll complete a whole series of things there. Pump house construction for the fire pumps, the fit out of the terminal, the kitchens and the bathrooms will be complete. All the decorative items will be up, furniture will be in, some of the joinery will be that's still to be completed will be done. The signage will be up and complete, and yeah, there'll be within the next month. Just about everything will be complete. And the installation of fencing around the Warbirds facility. We're waiting until we finish the bulk of the landscaping before we put the fencing around. And obviously, we don't have any clashes where the fence is damaged by the works if we put the fencing up too early there. Airside civil works, what was listed to be completed is the engine rev up pad. I can tell you it has now been completed since this report was first written. Critical issues for attention, I think I've mentioned, it's just the management of the completion of the works. It's as end of these type of projects, very busy. There's lots of things happening all at once. There's lots of subcontractors, but the main principal contractor is doing a very good job managing all of those. And then the management of the installation of the planes, which was, as I said, will start next week, and then the audio visual. There's the runways, taxiway, open surface issues that we're addressing the remediation of, and just generally close monitoring of everything. Major risks, again, just completion of the major works. If anything pops up, we need to address it very quickly. The surfaces, and as I've mentioned before, there is still the COVID-19 delays that we are susceptible to. Contract completion dates, as I said, the air side was completed April last year. And the Warbirds, the anticipated completion date is 8th of March for everything, including the landscaping outside. There's a few historical notes there on extensions of time. We've already discussed those in previous meetings. The table there for the milestones, table 2.1, has been adjusted so that the forecast completion date is the 8th of March. If we now scroll down a few pages to the budget and actual expenditure. Just scroll down another page, please. We'll see that, and the next page, please. Yeah, there we go. We'll see that the year to date, the second table there, year to date expenditure for 2022 is at 5.4 million. As Wayne said in his report, we're a little bit ahead of schedule there. And there's another monthly report that's come in this week for the work in January. It'll go into there, so that'll boost that up fairly quickly. So things are looking, expenditure's looking on track there. As we next scroll down to the next page, that's the risk table, which is really a summary of what I've already mentioned. Closing out all of the works and the coordination of contractors and subcontractors. Keeping an eye on, or very close, not an eye, but a very close handle on any variation that might arise to maintain the finances of the project. And then the third one there is services on the runway and consultation with contractors, subcontractors and designers to determine the remediation. So that brings me to the end of the report. Do we have any questions?
Sorry, I'm going to ask the mayor to take over for me because I've actually got to be in a doctor's appointment 5 minutes ago. So I'm going to head off and hand over to the chair. I have no problems with my questions in the next one either.
Thank you, Councillor Burns. So any questions from councillors to Chris?
Yes,
Councillor
through you, Mr. Chair. Just on page 288, with the budget and actual expenditure, and we've got that so I just want to, through you, Mr. Chair, ask, so have we already spent $15 million on, you know how that figure is there? And then the next one is 5. So are we already over 20 million when we have 23,556,732? Yes, I'm just wondering how much have we got left? And also, why do we quote that without GST? Why is that standard? Because that would be actually a bit more, wouldn't it? We actually have to outlay a lot more money than what's quoted.
Yeah, through the chair, with all our numbers, it's all echoing. It's all ex-GST, so we include our revenue streams as ex-GST as well as our expenditure for ex-GST, because the GST is a government tax, effectively, levy on it. So it has no bearing on the actual dollars and cents to council. So that's why it's regarded as ex. And the spend has been 15 million in up to the end of 2021. and 22 we spent 5.4, so we've spent 20 million and
So
500.
we're well over what we thought then.
No, $23.5 million is the actual budget.
Right, and
Yep.
so we're basically almost at completion.
Yep.
So my other question I have through you, Mr. Chair, is at the beginning of this report was how will the scheduled programme, which is in the red, which is a high risk, how will this affect warbirds that's coming up? How many weeks are we to warbirds?
Director?
Yeah, we're actually expecting everything to be almost done before Warbirds. Warbirds is the 26th and 27th of March. And it's going to be pretty tight, but we're going to be sort of moving in early March to just get everything ready for that. Worst case scenario, if the Hunter Warbirds isn't open, the air show can still go ahead, but we're anticipating that visitors will be able to go through the museum, the facility. Yeah.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the planned activities, the pump house construction, is that for fire?
Yeah, correct. There's fire suppression system.
And will that be in place before anyone steps foot out there?
Correct.
Okay. And the issue with the tarmac and the surface doesn't actually tell me what the issue is. Can I get a report on what the issue actually is, explaining it and what the remedy and so forth is?
Yeah, Chris, do you want to speak to that one?
Yes. There's a number, I guess there's different areas have different issues. The runway it's a bitumen and stone surface, and it's been shedding stones, and it needs to be vacuumed periodically every month, I think it is, to pick up the loose stones. So we're looking at what can be done to prevent the runway from shedding stones. And it's also exacerbated when planes turn sharply, to do a U-turn or a quick turn to get onto it, off the runway onto a taxiway. So we're looking at what might be done there. And we haven't decided the remediation. One of the aspects, it could be ball rolling on that to help lock the stones in. Another one is with some areas of the taxiway are bleeding bitumen through the stone, and you'll see that sometimes on roads as well. Now, part of one of the remediations that we're looking at there is rolling in some more stone, some finer stone to take up into the bitumen, and then the apron. It's not too bad a condition, but just we're potentially looking at rolling that, because there's some wheel marks when planes when they screw around. It's shifting the stones and leaving some marks. So some rolling on that surface to help embed the stones more into the bitumen to prevent that. So in a nutshell, that's what the situation is on the rectification works that we're looking at. But we're consulting widely with the experts to make sure that what is done is accepted and agreed by all parties, and so we should get a good outcome.
Okay, would we be having this problem if we had used hot mix?
By that, do you mean asphalt?
The standard, I read in the reports for airport that it was hot mix to be used on the runway, but we changed from that to bitumen and we saved some costs. But my question is, if we had have gone with the hot mix that was recommended in all the reports, would we be having this issue now with the change of surface?
The answer to that be that, no, you wouldn't be having these problems.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I would like to just comment on that too, because it was something I raised because many of the airport users raised it at the time, that hot mix should have been the material used. So will we consider now to go back to that and put hot mix on and rule out having to have a vacuum cleaner or whatever it is, vacuum up the pebbles? Will we consider spending the money as we should have done in the first place and go back to hot mix?
Chris, can I just comment there, please?
Yes, please, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, so we're all aware, councillors, that the initial tendering process went over budget by some $2 and $3 million on the hot mix, and also the attraction centre went over $1 million, about the same, I believe. So there was rumours around that we took the money off the runway and put in the attraction centre. That's completely wrong. So we didn't have the money because we were sworn by we were going to bring it on budget. So yes, the long-term plan would be, and we've talked to the politicians, would be to put a hot mix over it. So we got the initial work, got all that done. We'll continue to work with the politicians. If we could get the money, that would be ideal. Would be absolutely ideal. But the only thing, Chris, I could say is it is a little disappointing that this has got to this, and we're going to be relying on you and the staff to make sure that if there's anything that contractors haven't done correctly, you will certainly follow that up.
Yes, Mr. Chair, that is part of what we're pursuing, and we have issued defect notifications on the contractors.
Mr. Chair, I'd just like to comment further that it does really concern me about aircrew safety, because obviously the runway is a very important structure, and the fact that we even decided to take a budgeted approach to the runway to put it over to a museum really concerned me back whenever we were discussing this some time ago. So I want to comment that air crews safety is of prime importance, and we really need to rectify this.
Are you saying we took the money off the runway to put in the attraction centre?
However, we budgeted to take a lesser safe option, I believe was incorrect. And I think we should have always had the right material and the top material for the runway. It's crucial in air safety.
Chris, do you want to take over that one?
This, through the chair, the designer that we've been working with, who, well, sorry, not the designer. Sorry, I'll retract that. Because the contract was a design and construct, but the design specialist that we've been using as a consultant on this, he stands by the use of bitumen and stone on runways on regional airports. And in fact, at Broome Airport, which is very hot weather, they use a bitumen and stone surface there, and they take 737s. And he said that there is absolutely no problem with that runway there, with safety or stone shed or anything. So I think it's not just the fact that asphalt wasn't used and that bitumen and stone was used. I think the problem is a bit deeper than that, and that's what we're trying to work through with the contractors.
Through you, Mr. Chair. I'd like details, whether it's provided confidentially to council or whatever format it has to be in, of the communication with the contractor as to why they're refuting the claim and what the crux of the conflict is there.
Oh, look, we're still in negotiations with Public Works and the contractor, so it's probably inappropriate to talk about that at this point in time. But once we do come to the end point of the resolution, we will make that known.
Thank you, councillors. No more questions to Chris? No? Okay.
Yeah, I do. Also, the impact of remedial works, the handover of the HWB fee, Is that talking about the opening of the actual warbirds display? Is that what we're talking about there, that handover?
I'm unsure of which part of the report you're talking
Sorry,
about.
on page 282 at the bottom, with risk saying that the impact of the material works, remedial works may impact it, be a potential delay for the handover. I'm just wondering what you mean by the handover.
Yeah, that would be, I'm just looking for when the report comes up. Impact of remedial works and any additional variation work at this period of time have significant potential to delay the handover of 100 warbirds in March. Yeah, and that's handover of the 100 warbirds from the contractor to council.
Warbirds to occur.
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry, I'll speak on that one. I think that item is referring to, do you remember we had an issue with the flexing in the structural steel? And that potentially, if that hadn't have been fixed, then there would have been a delay in the handover of the facility. Now that was identified and rectified at the contractor's cost. So essentially that risk has been eliminated in terms of the handing over of the Hunter Warbird Visitor Attraction Centre. That's what that long acronym stands for. So we actually don't use that. We just call it Hunter Warbirds.
Museum?
Yeah. No, we don't use museum. Yeah.
Okay, no further questions. We'll move back to page 281, the recommendation that council receive the report and note the information. Got a mover?
Sure.
Move Councillor Flaherty, second Councillor Williamson. No more questions, comment? All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Okay, over to, shouldn't take much dealing with this, should it? Page 290, 02.6, response to previous questions. This is only Councillor Fisher and Councillor Burns. Nope. So the recommendation is just for notation only. Got a mover, Councillor Abbott, Councillor Flaherty. All in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Okay, so no other questions?
Yes, I have questions. I have councillor questions. So I have two. So my first one is, after the 2022 warbirds, I might take my mask off. I'll start again. After the 2022 warbirds, will council consider returning to the former structure of the event whereby council was paid a fee for the use of the aerodrome and bore none of the risk running such a risky event, where we now see the ratepayers bearing all the burden of potential loss and essentially to date with no profit ever coming our way? Mr. Bennett used to pay us. That's my first question.
I'll take it on notice.
Thank you. And my second question is in relation to the sale yards. And with Scone sale yards, how long can we continue at a loss? Apart from optimism, what is the long-term plan for the centre?
Again, take it on notice. There is a long-term financial projection for that. There is a turnaround point that we're estimating. I'll take that on notice, Councillor.
Yep, through you, Mr. Chair. Just to get my head around some of these major projects, would I be able to get a fairly simplified report of, say, the airport and warbirds, the sale yards, Campbell's Corner, some of those bigger projects, of what the initial projections were? I understand that they've changed over a period of time and been adjusted, but what the initial projections were for those projects and where we're up to now.
Do you mean from a capital perspective or from a business perspective?
From a business perspective, so incomings and outgoings, but from, like say, for example, with the airport project, I know that's changed a lot with projections. So I'd like to just be able to benchmark it and look at it for the original business plan that we had for that and projections compared to where it's at, even if there is that sliding scale of how each project has changed, would be really helpful.
Yeah, we'll take that on. I know the sale yard was 11.8 but it ended up at 12 because there was the stage 5 loading, which council agreed. But it was really, that was an animal welfare issue in terms of the loading. So that went up to 12 million. So I'll answer that one.
Yeah.
The airport has always been 23.5 in the 3 years I'm here. I've been here. So that's pretty much hasn't changed. Campbell's
But
Corner.
just looking at, say, for example, with the sale yards, what kind of cattle we're having going through there, what kind of user fees we're charging for the original projection to now.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Same with the airport, how many hangars are we going to have now compared to what the initial projection was? So more of a breakdown on that way, not just the budget, but how the project has evolved.
Sure, I could answer. There's a lot of questions there. I could answer.
Yeah, that's why I thought a
lot
report would be great.
We'll probably be here for an hour, so
a report would be easier, I think.
Yeah. There's nothing you've said that I can't answer, but
great.
I'll be here all day answering.
Yeah,
so I'll bring something back. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, just on the sale yards, I think you'll see the numbers start to rise as of next month because it's weaning. Everyone will be bringing their weaners in the sale. I already started last week myself. And I think it's important to know, yes, it's a battle financially, but the economy that sale yards, the amount of millions per week, you go and see the business houses, which, Toyotas and tractor sales and whatever are absolutely booming. So, I mean, anyway, that's helping the economy, but I suppose it's not helping our budget, but I'm confident that the numbers are on the way. Okay, no more business. We'll declare the meeting closed at 2 minutes past 11. Thank you all. Thank you, Adam. Okay. Thank you. Bye.